Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to our respected teachers, Honorable Speaker Mr. Mani Rangarajan, and my dear friends. Hope everyone is safe and sound and enjoying this time of quarantine with your loved ones. Today's session is about a topic that we all have a curiosity about, and every one of us has a speculation about the same, and that is industry after COVID 19. We have amongst us Mr. Rangarajan, who would enlighten us on this very topic and give his expert reviews on what possible impact would such a pandemic have on the industry and how could the damage be controlled. Mr. Money started his career with Citigroup, where he initially specialized in transaction services such as cash management, trade services, operations and management for the corporate bank. Sir spent last 4 years of his time with Citigroup as a global transaction services specialist with the risk management team, where he led risk management reviews of several corporate bank and consumer bank businesses in Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. Sir also worked with Yahoo for 6 years, where he reported to the Chief Financial Officer and was involved in the corporate development, corporate finance, business operations, financial planning and analysis, and worked on projects of strategic importance. For the last 5 years, Sir has been a Chief Financial Officer and executive at several leading startups in diverse verticals such as SCM, Cosmix, Media Boost, Efficient Frontier, Evergent, Boku, Mobibucks, Rewards Pay, etc. Welcome, sir. We all are very happy to have you amongst us, and thank you for sparing some time from your busy schedule to enlighten us on the same.
Uh, Very good afternoon to all of you, and indeed honored to be here amongst all of you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for your time as well. And I do hope all of you are very safe with your loved ones. Uh, it's indeed a time of great crisis, not only for India but for the rest of the world. I'll spend some time, today talking about, the kind of impact that we have seen in our company, the company where I work for currently, right, and the impact on the real estate market as a whole, and then I'll open the floor to questions. I'm sorry I didn't have the time to prepare a deck, so apologize. I should have put together a few slides. So let me just talk about the company where I work for, and I talk about the industry in general. So I'm the Group Chief Operating Officer of Elara Technologies. And Elara Technologies was founded in 2011. And as a company, we are funded by SoftBank, which most of you would have heard of, Real Estate Australia, which owns a lot of real estate companies around the world, News Corporation, that used to own Star, and which still owns like Wall Street Journal, Realtor.com, Accel Partners, which was the investor in Flipkart, amongst other companies, Helion Venture Partners, Qualcomm Ventures, and DST Ventures as well. So we have got like a very marquee set of investors. And the company originally was founded as PropTiger.com, which is a real estate brokerage play. And that is a purely an offline play where you have feet on the street and to help like sell new homes to customers. There is zero brokerage for customers. In other words, customers do not have to pay a fee for finding a home, but developers have to pay a commission that varies between 3 to 6 or 7%. And the Elara Technologies in around 2015, they acquired a company called Makaan.com, which is like an internet marketplace. And in 2016, they acquired Housing.com. And Housing.com is an internet marketplace as well, right? So today we operate two different sets of businesses. One is Housing.com and Makaan.com, which are internet marketplaces, where we have about 20 million uh, site traffic on a monthly basis, right? And where users come in to find new homes or to find homes which are being resold by other users, or they come in to find homes for rent. And on the monetization side, uh, we monetize both developers as well as brokers. So developers typically use our platform for marketing their projects, right? And marketing could mean anything from just having like a banner ad on the site to very exotic ads, video ads, taking over the site for a day. Uh, they could also have like a 360 marketing approach where we not only market their projects on housing.com and makaan.com platform, but they could also do like 360 marketing on Facebook, right? And we also are the only one of the few portals I would say globally that also do like content products. So we do a lot of video walkthroughs. We do like 360 walkthroughs. We do shoots, real-time shoots of the project. We do like drone shoots. We do augmented reality. We do virtual reality. So on one side, you have housing and Makaan.com, which is purely an online business, where we have like about 400 people on the street to sell the product. So this is a feet on street sales force. And on the other hand, we have PropTiger, which is like an offline brokerage play, where we contract with developers to sell new homes to users. So the group as a whole is doing very well, and we have more than 2,000 odd employees. And recently, we raised a 70 million round of financing from the existing investors, and almost all the existing investors participated. Right. So let me talk about how the COVID crisis impacted our company first, right? So I think the first signs of COVID came in during the second week of March, right? And the first thing we saw on our site was traffic went down, right? And when I say that traffic went down on the buy side, where users come in to buy new homes or to buy rental homes, we saw that the traffic went down by as much as like 40 to 50%, right? And and this was quite shocking to us, especially in the first few days of the lockdown. And in the case of rent, we saw traffic go down by as much as 60 to 70%. So we had to deal with that, right? So that was the first thing to deal with. Right? The second thing which impacted us was, of course, the that we did not have physical access to the offices, and like all other companies, we had to implement a complete lockdown of our offices. And on the PropTiger side, which is an offline business, where you have to uh, take customers and go and show them the physical site, and then contract, with developers. There were several things which went missing. So first of all, customers could not step out of the houses. Second is that customers could not do site visits, and here we are in the business of selling home, right? And unlike a business like Flipkart or something, where the user engagement is pretty high and where the average ticket size is very low, this is a one in a lifetime kind of experience. Then concept, right? There are few people who have but and also uh, people are becoming wary of really going and visiting the site, right? And in the case of PropTiger, for example, when you take into account transaction mix, right? So there's 80% of the transaction for ready to move homes. About 20% of transactions happens for ready to move homes, right? So as a company, we were pretty paralyzed, right, on the first few days of the lockdown. And the first thing we did was implement continuity of can people put themselves? So every business needs to have a continuity of business plan. And the continuity of business plan needs to be very comprehensive. So the continuity of business plan pretty needs to document uh, what is the impact each event can have on a business, right? I'm referring to, uh, let's say you're using a third-party vendor and the third-party vendor goes out of business, or the physical premises is not accessible like we had now, or let's say the database or the systems are not accessible because you're being subject to a hacking episode, right? So those are the events. The second thing which you need to document is what is the impact of this event on various things that the business does, right? So for one, uh, this event could impact service level agreements that you have with other companies. Events could typically have a financial impact. They could have a customer service impact, and they could have a regulatory impact. The third is you also need to have like the outage time frame. So you have like less than 24 hours, uh, 24 to 48 hours, and greater than 48 hours, right? Once you define the impact analysis and once you define the risk, and you can quantify the risk as low, medium, or high risk, the second thing for us is to say, how are we going to operate during this scenario, right? So, for example, if you don't have access to your office spaces, then how will you be, uh, operating, right? Uh, the third thing which you need to document is how do you train people for this contingency, right? So working from home and working from the office happens to be two very, very different things. The fourth is what is the containment strategy? How do you contain an event like this? And in this, for example, if you had a third party vendor, you could always go and contract with a second third party vendor. But in an event like this, which is a pandemic, there's nothing you can control. And the fifth is the recovery strategy, right? So how are we going to recover from this event, right? So the first thing we did was to activate a continuity of business plans. So in our cases, most of the people had laptops, right? There were some people in the sales team used tablets. In some cases, people had only had desktops at the office, right? So within a period of 2 to 3 hours, which was the period of time the government had given us, right, to implement the lockdown, we virtually had to transport all the desktops to people's homes. So we used people's cars, we used Uber, we used Ola, we used like various transportation methods to get it transported to people's homes, right? And prior to that, I forgot missing a point. So when the government implemented the one-day lockdown, that gave us an opportunity to test a continuity of business plans. So even though that day was a Sunday, we had 20 to 30% of our workforce work from home, log in, and just check whether systems, etc., could be accessed and whether we were compromising the speed of access of the databases, whether there were issues accessing the systems and the databases. So we used that one-day lockdown that the Prime Minister announced to test the continuity of business plan, and we were able to iron out issues in bandwidth and accessing systems. We are able to fine-tune the system speed, etc. Right. So when the lockdown was announced, what we did was we transported desktops to people's homes, and that's how we got the company kind of up and running, right? The second thing which we had to deal with how do you track the productivity of employees, right? So fortunately for us, as part of the continuity of business, we had developed like productivity tracking tools. So for example, in the case of salespeople, we use GPS, which is embedded into the CRM system of the salesperson. So we could typically track where the salesperson is at which point in time, and that's something which we do for our 800 strong sales team. So that part was taken care of. So in case of functions like, for example, uh, the calling center or for operations, we have pretty good systems in place. And we had systems which can tell you whether people are logged into the system, what are people doing at this point in time. So we had like developed productivity tools. So the first few days of the lockdown, what we had to do was we had to really uh, over manage it. I got on several calls with several teams explaining what the situation is, and getting people aligned to the concept of working from home. So along with the continuity of business plan, one of the things we did was we also had policies on how people are going to work from home, right? So typically, when you're working in the office, especially in a function like calling, right? Uh, it's easy for the supervisor to monitor what people are doing on the floor and easy to control the floor. But in this kind of situation, right, we had to like schedule hourly meetings, right? So every hour there would be a quick 1 to 2 minute huddle session with the supervisor, where they would look at, how many calls they had made, what they need to do for the rest of the day. So it's very, very important to touch base with your employee base very, very frequently, right, during the kind of the time of COVID, right? So the first couple of days, right, we spent a lot of time ironing out the operating teams of the company. So the operations, whether it related to site operations, whether it related to product management, it related to technology, as I said, the calling center, finance, HR, we got all these teams well aligned, right, and well aligned to the concept of working from home. Then the second thing which happens is how do you generate revenue, right, during this period of lockdown? So on housing, what we did was housing is an online marketplace. So what we did was we quickly innovated some products, right? So one of the products that we innovated on the housing side was the ability of the user to connect with the developer or the broker using video calls, right? And also, for the ability of the developer and the broker to showcase projects virtually, right? So we implemented a lot of changes on the platform, right? And we launched new products through which users could connect with developers and with brokers, right, instantaneously through video calls, right? And they could do virtual tours and virtual site visits, right? So that really helped us. The second is what we did on housing is from the point of view of the sellers, and we have close to about 10,000 customers who pay and participate on the platform. We had to reach out to the trade, right? And we had to assure them that for people who had bought like subscription packages, we will we would extend the packages till the lockdown was over. And that's very, very important to do because you have to connect with your sellers and ensure that they derive ROI, right? A return on investment for the money which they've spent on the platform, right? So imagine you're going through a period where you're shutting down your offices, nobody's coming to your site, etc., right? So the return on investment for the products that they've brought naturally declines. So what we did here was we reached out and we extended the packages, right? And our CEO sent out messages. The third thing which we did on housing side, both from the user's perspective as well as from a seller's perspective, is that we organized a lot of webinars. And those webinars are going today. So the webinars are very topical on should we be buying a home right now, right? Or should we be taking a home loan right now, right? or a real estate prices going to fall, or how do you protect yourself from real estate prices falling, right? So a lot of topical webinars to keep both the seller base as well as the user base engaged. So that's another thing which we did on housing, right? On the PropTiger side, that was far more challenging, right? Because as I said, people are used to visiting a site and then buying a home, right? So we had to virtually reinvent the cycle. We had to reinvent the cycle and had to change the learning behavior, right? So there are a couple of things which we did here. The first thing we did was we quickly we had an online booking platform, and we quickly brought up the online booking platform, right? So today there are users who can buy uh, homes sitting in the comfort of their own. The second thing which we did was we launched video calls as well, right? So today we have a lot of our sales teams who are
अन्नारे खाली उतरला लागणार अन्नारे.
today we have a lot of our sales team who are connecting with customers and developers through video calls and who are showcasing virtual site visits. In fact, last weekend, what we did was there was a project by Shapuji Palunji, which is one of the reputed developers in India, and we had a virtual drone shoot. So people sitting in the comfort of their homes could virtually see the site being constructed, construction labor being active on the site, right? The third thing which we did with developers was, customers are reluctant to buy homes because they think that the prices of the home will come down. So we worked with them to introduce like special schemes, which is like you can buy a home by paying up to 50,000 or paying up to ₹1,00,000, and you can visit the site within 30 days from the lockdown ending. And if you don't like it, you can gain a complete refund. We also have introduced price protection plans where developers are giving an assurance to the home buyers, right? Saying that if the prices are going to fall over the next 3 to 6 months, right, then the buyers would get compensated for any fall in prices. So this is a complete set of things we did where we took a purely offline business, which is an offline brokerage business, and we transformed it into an online business. In fact, last month on the PropTiger side and the housing side, we did 50 to 60% of the normal business that we do. It's not 100% as yet, but because of the quick actions that we took and because we were nimble as a startup and we are a technology company with a lot of technology assets that we have built in, we were able to tide over the situation and still deliver revenues, right? So coming on the cost side, right? So whenever an event like this happens, there is normally a lot of pressure on cost. Okay, so when you look at the investor base that we have, yeah, when we look at the investor, the base that we have financial investors, which are companies like Axel Partners, which Helion Ventures, SAF Partners, right? And then we have strategic partners who are like Real Estate Australia and News Corporation, who are in the domain of real estate, right? Strategic partners and strategic investors normally understand, they take a longer term view of the business, right? And in the case of the financial investors are very, very cost oriented, right? So there was an immediate pressure on cost, right? Because the board simply told us that if you're not able to deliver revenues, then you got to cut costs, right? So the pressure on us was immense, particularly in the first few days of lockdown, because we had to transform a lot of things digitally. And due to how agile a company was, and due to the fact that we are a tech company, as I mentioned, we had a lot of tech assets in place. We were able to minimize the damage. Of course, we are 50% behind in terms of the revenues that we had planned for the month of April during our annual planning cycle, right? But what we have also done is, we have also focused a lot on cost, right? For a business like us, we spend a lot of money on marketing, right? So we ended up cutting a lot of money on marketing, and all of us took pay reductions, right? And we, as a management team, we were very insistent that the pay reduction should impact every employee in the organization, right? So depending on the grade of the employee, right, we took pay cuts. So for example, the lowest grade took pay cuts of about 5%. And we said that the pay cuts are going to be for about 3 months. And we'd probably be extending the pay cuts for a period up to 6 months. People at various grades took like 10%, 15%, 20% pay cuts. So for example, I have taken a 30% pay cut, and my manager, who's the CEO of the company, has taken like a 50% pay cut, right? Because we wanted to demonstrate to investors saying that we are very cash focused. So normally in an episode like this, in a crisis like this, what happens is that investors want you to extend the cash runway, and we are a startup, right? So normally when you raise a round of financing, you raise it for a period of 18 to 24 months, right? And when you're extending your cash runway, then they expect you to extend it by a period of another 6 months or so. So the cash which you have raised for 18 months should now be available to you over a period of 24 months to a 30-month period, right? So you got to be very focused on costs. So one is we focused on, as I said, taking pay reductions, right? And for most startups, for most companies, right, the wage bill is the most significant part of the expense. For most companies, the salary bill is between 50 to 80% of the total costs. Right? So that's the first thing which you have to do, which is going to have a significant impact to the bottom line, right? The second is we also took a hard look at some of the staff welfare policies we had and the benefits for our employees. So we have cut down on everything from travel. We have cut down on employee entertainment, official entertainment, and all of that, right? And the third thing which I said was we cut down a lot of money on marketing, right? So we said that we will try to manage with a lesser amount of site visits, and being a portal, we acquire traffic as well through spending money on Google and Facebook and all of the sites. So we said we'd cut down on marketing expenses, right? And the fourth, which is the biggest bucket, which any company should focus on, is focusing on G&A, right? For looking at office expenses. So one of the big things that this pandemic is going to have an impact is life is not going to be the same anymore, right? For most of us, and I can certainly speak for myself, this is going to be this is a once in a lifetime kind of experience, right? And after this, I can bet you that for the next few years, for the next 3 to 4 years, life is not going to be the same, right? So in the case of, for example, the office space, right? Just think of an office space post the lockdown kind of environment, right? For one, you have to maintain social distancing. So you cannot, for example, have more than 3 to 4 people sit in a conference room, right? The second thing is, even if you have workstations, right, you need to have 6-foot distance between one workstation and the other, right? A third is in terms of having visitors in the office. Fourth is in terms of having like town hall meetings. cafeterias, providing food and water. So all of this is going to be impacted, right? So one of the things that we are thinking of doing as a company is trying to move to a work from home kind of policy, right? So what we would do is we look at the cross-functional interaction between teams. So for example, if we say that the product and technology team need to work closely together, then we'd have the product and the technology team come in, let's say twice a week, right? We'd have the marketing team come in twice a week. On the sales side, we will have stronger controls over productivity, introduce more productivity tools such as GPS, and have the sales team just come into the office to do the morning huddle, right? And after that, disperse to the field, right? So besides saving on office expense, this is the only way to go. You've had, for example, companies like Axis Bank, which has said that they're going to make wearing masks mandatory in the office. So they're saying that somebody who comes into the office has to kind of book office space, right? TCS, for example, has said that about 75% of the people are going to be working from home, and this is a target that they have set for themselves in 2025, right? So I think one of the biggest impacts that this pandemic has had on us is it's going to change the way that we work, right? Workspace is not going to be the same anymore. You're going to see a lot of places trying to give up bigger offices and move into a co-working kind of environment where workspaces can be flexible. So for example, as it is, a lot of our offices are in a co-working kind of space because it gives us a flexibility if we want to increase headcount or decrease headcount, because we don't have to lock ourselves into a rental agreement with any landlord. And the way are going to be defined and the way workstations are going to be defined is also going to change, right? So that's going to have a huge impact, right? So that is one impact. The second impact you're going to see, which you already see, is the impact of digital, right? You're going to see a lot of digitization, right? So for example, in the case of housing, one of the things that we had built is digital sales, right? And please remember that in housing, we are in a B2B, a business to business kind of environment. So we have created digital sales whereby, and a self-serve platform whereby a developer or a broker could come onto a platform, buy the product or package that they want, can renew the product or package, see the performance, etc. Even in the case agreement the customers, a lot of these agreements are moving online. We realize that in a COVID kind of environment, even post this pandemic, right, there may be a lot of restriction on visitors to go to people's offices. So we have created a workflow whereby a term sheet or an agreement can be generated by the salesperson online that can be sent to the customer. The customer can then accept it, and it's all recorded in the system. We are moving a lot to digital signatures. On the PropTiger side, again, as I said, we have moved to an online booking platform, right? Even post the pandemic, lockdown norms easing, right? We are going to see very few people who would want to go to a real estate site, right? So there, for example, we have to work smart and ask the customer to do like maximum one or maximum 2 site visits prior to deciding to buy a property, right? So in short, I think, if you look at the impact of which the crisis is going to have on us, I think the world is going to move largely digital. The second is that, as all of you know, there is going to be a significant slowdown in the economy, and the slowdown is going to extend to almost all sectors. So for example, in the case of real estate sector, we think that developers will push back the new launches. So it's going to be about so new launches are going to decline by around 25 to 30%. Sales is going to decline by as much as like 25 to 30%. Uh, Third is that as I said, uh, video consumption is going to increase. Transactions are going to happen online, and online is going to be the way to go. The fourth is that workspaces are going to get impacted. The way all of us are going to work is going to change. Uh, Fifth is, you're going to have, as all of you know, the impact on employment is going to be very, very significant, right? It's going to be very difficult to source jobs. There's going to be a lot of layoff in the economy. There are going to be salary cuts. A lot of companies are not going to pay bonuses. So, for example, in our company, when it comes to the bonus, instead of cash bonus, we are planning to give stock, right, to people, right? Sixth is, the case of startups, particularly in the Indian startup ecosystem, things are not going to be good, simply because, a lot of investment happens through like the FDI route, the foreign direct investment, and, people cannot even travel to do due diligence of a company, right? As you know, there are restrictions on travel. Domestic travel may ease up, but international travel is going to take, let's say, a 3 to 6 months time before it comes to some sort of normalcy. So companies are not going to be able to really raise a significant amount of financing in this. So you're going to see a lot of companies crunch down on cost, do a lot of layoffs. Some companies, like for example, Airbnb, has laid off almost like 25 to 30% of the workforce, right? If you take emerging industries, for example, co-living, right, which is a huge space, right, where people tend to live together in dorm-like facilities, that's going to have an impact in the short term because people are not going to be wanting to live in a community kind of setting, right? And co-living selling proposition is based on community living. So all in all, right, we are headed for a really, really tough time over the next at least 1 to 2 years. But one of the things that I personally feel is that even if the pandemic disappears, and even if by chance, let's say that 2 months from now, COVID disappears, right? I think it's going to have a remarkable impact on the psychology of people, right? Uh, so you're going to have, even if the government does not introduce social distancing norms, I think people will themselves practice social distancing, right? Just think of something like going to a mall or going and sitting in a restaurant or going to a movie theater, right? There are people who will not visit movie theaters for years, right? Or if movie theaters are operational, they'll have to operate on half seating, right? Where the seat next to you is empty or the two seats next to you are empty. Similar is the case of airline travel, right? So somebody was saying that, even in the economy class, you should have two people to a row or maybe even one person to a row. But just think of the impact it will have on the cost base of the airline and what the airline needs to do to get to break even. So, airline ticket prices will have to rise like 2 or 3 times for airlines to kind of break even, right? So you're going to see a rise in airline tickets. You're probably going to see a lot of movies getting released online. So this is going to impact a lot of industries, and that impact is going to be far-ranging. It's going to be across the globe, right? And I'm hoping that with all this antagonism that the world has towards China, I'm hoping that Make in India will become more of a reality, and I'm hoping that a lot of companies will relocate their manufacturing hub to India, right? So it has positive effects too, as far as digitization, etc., is concerned, but it has a lot of negative impact in the case in the way consumers are going to behave. Probably footfall in the malls are going to decrease. Probably people will buy more online, and digitization as a whole across the economy and across the globe is going to increase. Uh, so those are the few thoughts that I thought I would kind of leave you with, and I'm happy to answer any questions or uh, brainstorm on any ideas that any of you may have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rangarajan.
Yeah.
Students, any questions? The floor is open to you now.
Hello, sir. This is Abhishek Khanna from MBA RUI. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. So my question for you is, looking at the level of competition and number of market intelligent platforms providing and covering almost every macro and micro market, like Magicbricks, IPC reports, etc. What are your strategies to retain customer base in terms of data accuracy and providing better digital platforms for users?
Right, that's a great question. So one is, we always think that there is going to be a section of home buyers, right? So there are people who are still interested in buying homes, and as I explained to you, one of the things we did was we did online booking transactions last month, and we did 50% or 50 to 60% of the normal transaction volumes that we did, which we had, right? So the second thing is, we operate in three markets. So one is new homes, the second is rent, and third is resale, right? Now, what's going to happen is that if the new homes market is going to decline in terms of sales, right? People are going to migrate towards the rental market, right? And in the rental market, we are going to see a correction in yields. So it's going to become cheaper to rent a home. Rental prices are also going to come down. So that's another thing. The second change which this pandemic is going to have is in terms of people's choice of where to live, right? So, for example, right now, if you go to like a market like Bangalore, or then people tend to live in certain places like, so for example, Whitefield, people are going to want to live in like Electronic City, right, and a couple of micro markets. And people choose these micro markets because they have a good physical and social infrastructure, and also it's very close to the place of work, right? Now all that will change, right? So imagine a situation where a person working in TCS in Bangalore is being told, listen, you can work from home. You need to come to office once in 2 weeks, or maybe once a week, right? In that case, people can have would rather spread out. So they'd rather buy a property, let's say in the west of Bangalore, which has significant chance of price appreciation, than buy a more expensive property in, let's say, a Whitefield or an Electronic City, right? So what we might actually see is that we might actually see some shift in urbanization. So right now, what's happening in India is urbanization is taking place at about 40%. And in a couple of years from now, India is going to overtake China in terms of urbanization and in terms of the population living in urban areas. But if you're going to have things like, for example, work from home or practices similar to that, then somebody may even, let's say, want to live in a Mysore and commute to Bangalore once or twice a month when they need to go to work, right? So that can also be a change. So what we are doing on the housing platform is, one is we are introducing a lot of video tools, both for customers as well as users, right? So that people can collaborate with customers, where a user can collaborate with either a broker or a developer using a video tool. As I said, we have already launched like online booking platforms where people can book homes. We are doing a lot of virtual tours tours, where people can tour a rental property without actually visiting the property, but sitting in their home, right? So the broker or the owner can go around the house and do a panorama of the house, right? So that people who are really interested in a particular home could do a virtual tour of the house before actually going and looking at the house to buy or rent, right? So we are introducing a lot of digitization. And also what we are doing is that we are also, historically, we have always been focusing on the tier 1 cities, which are the top 9 to 10 cities in India. Now we are expanding our market presence because we think that some of the tier 2 cities, the tier 3 cities, the smaller cities like, let's say, a Lucknow or a Bhubaneswar or a Ranchi also has great growth potential in this time. Right? So increasing digitization, increasing tools for users to come online, transact and buy homes, see homes virtually, and also expanding our geographic presence to the smaller cities, because we believe that the smaller cities may actually grow faster than the larger cities at this point.
Yeah, so thanks a lot. So there's one add-up question to this, if I can ask.
Sure.
Yeah. So, sir, so why? So there are so many unsold apartments, and 1/3 of them are in Noida itself. So, sir, are you planning for this strategy as well, where some homes can be designated as quarantine centers through your platforms? And the second question is, are developers looking into this strategy where they can have one study or work room designed as part of the new norm or the new normal which we are actually saying? Yeah.
Oh, excellent questions, Abhishek. So the first is in quarantine centers, right? See, a lot of homes in Noida are not even ready to move in, right? So of the homes which are in Noida, and Noida has an unsold inventory of about 40 months of sales. Right?
Sir, I'm talking about the constructed ones.
The constructed ones. The constructed ones, see, a lot of developers are not looking for quarantine centers and all of that, right? So a lot of them are trying to move into co-living space because the quarantine center is very, very short term, right? It's about like a 2 to 3 month kind of thing, and they don't want to provide like a fully rented fully completed apartment complex to be used as quarantine centers, right? And that would also kind of they worry that will also impact the future saleability of the apartment. Instead, what a lot of developers are trying to do is they are trying to give away the entire, let's say, a tower to a company like, for example, Oyo, right? And allow them to run like a co-living kind of facility. So that kind of idea is catching on. The second thing which you said about people asking for a study and all of that, that has a lot of relevance. So there are a couple of things which are emerging. In India, right, there is a concept of half a room, right? But normally you don't find it in too many cities. You might find it in, for example, in a place like Bangalore, where you will have 1.5 bedrooms, right, or 2.5 bedrooms. So that concept is kind of catching on. And as you said rightly, a lot of people are saying that they want to have like a study, right, because they realize this concept of working from home is here to stay. And so people are looking for a study or some sort of small office space. The second thing which people are also asking for is open spaces, right? So in sometimes in some apartment complexes, all the towers are pretty close to each other, right? And it tends to become kind of claustrophobic. So what people are asking for is, I want to stay in an apartment complex where there's, for example, 60 or 70% open space, right? So that even if it's the case of a lockdown and I'm not able to, for example, go outside, right, the complex, I want to have some space to exercise or take a walk in the complex along with my family. So that's becoming one. The third change which we are saying is you're going to see a lot of sales in mixed use properties where there's some amount of commercial or retail space in the property as well, right? because some of the issues with some of the apartment complexes, particularly in affordable housing, is that there's no retail space, right? There's no grocery shop or no convenience store. So now users are also starting to ask for, can I have like a convenience store? Can I live in a mixed use kind of building where if there's a lockdown or something imposed, there are a couple of shops within my complex, so I'm not hampered for groceries or any day-to-day needs. That's great questions, Abhishek. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. They were all wonderfully answered, and I hope and wish that life comes back to normal and we all are able to see each other and probably speak in times to come, actually in physical form. And thank you, sir. You have wonderfully answered all my questions. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hello, sir. Vikas here, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your time, sir, and for this wonderful session. I have a question regarding, I have two questions actually. The first one will be, how has the pandemic affected the Tier 1 cities business, sir? Because like if you see, as of now, the current top thing places where pandemic are this Tamil Nadu, we have Delhi. So how has it affected? And the second question would be, sir, as far as, I mean, I was just going through the housing.com website maybe last week, because we are currently in hostel, we are students and we are planning to move out for the next semester. So does, I mean, will the website be providing areas like, the red zone, green zone, in case, even if things are coming down but not fully settled? So do you have any strategy for that?
Yeah, see, one of the things which we are thinking about introducing on our platform is kind of a heat map around, where COVID is widespread. So we will be introducing something on our site which says that these are red zones, there is a green zone, there is an orange zone, and we hope to update that real time, or if not on a real time basis, at least on a daily basis, right? And again, that's a good thought. That's something which is there on the product roadmap, right? The second thing which we are planning to do is that we are planning to tie up with third-party vendors, and for those of our customers who are interested, we are trying to see if we can hygiene certify certain homes. So, for example, in the case of co-living, you have companies like Oyo, Zolo, you have Nestaway, and all of that. So we are working with them to try and see if we can have, let's say, a third-party vendor like an Equinox go to the facility and certify the facility, disinfect the facility, and provide like hygiene certificates. So that's something also which we are planning to do, because ultimately I think, especially in a co-living kind of environment, people would be really worried about hygiene and would want to ensure that the homes are disinfected, or at least these the company offering the co-living facility has a way of let's say doing like a weekly disinfecting of the homes, etc., and a way of testing people who are living in that. So those are two ideas, right? So in terms of how the impact has been overall, right? So even though Mumbai and Pune were the most are amongst the most affected cities in terms of COVID, on the PropTiger side, we saw that Mumbai and Pune contributed the highest towards home buying, right? See, because there are a couple of factors also at work. So one is the Reserve Bank and consequently has reduced the repo rate and reverse repo rate. So if you take banks like State Bank, the home loan lending rate is about 7%, right? 7.15 is, I think, the minimum rate. That's one. Second is that, in this pandemic, people have all realized that the home is very valuable, right? So your home is the safest place in the world where you could be, right? So there's a lot of value attached to the home. Third is that even though real estate market has not shown significant appreciation, prices have not really declined over the years, right? So people have been decimated in the stock market, right? And if you can see the gold market, it's all very volatile, Sometimes the stock market goes up and I wonder why, because I don't think there's any good news in the market from any company out there except for save the pharma companies, right? Or companies making like masks and gloves and all of that. There's only a very uh, minute segment of the economy which will really report good news and good earnings. So I'm not sure why there's exuberance in the stock market. One day the market rises, one day the market is, just falls. So there's a lot of irrational exuberance in the market, and there's a lot of irrational behavior in the market. So in this kind of situation, right, real estate is a more tangible asset where the prices are not really going to fall. Fourth is that a lot of developers are coming out with special schemes. So for example, Godrej has come out with a scheme where you pay 10%, right now, and you pay 90% on possession, right? And you don't pay anything in between. So if you're an investor and you have some cash to spare, you may buy 10%, you pay 10%, and then pay 90% on possession, right? And you'd be hoping that over the next 2-3 years, before the project becomes ready, and this is for under construction properties, right? There will be some sort of price appreciation. Similarly, it's a case of a person who is living in a rented home. You pay 10% of your savings, you pay your rent for the next 3 years in the house you're living in, and then you move into your property and then you pay like 90%. So you don't even have to take a bank loan. You don't have to take an EMI or pay interest or principal on that, right? So people are coming up with special schemes. And lastly, there is a huge segment of interest from the NRI population, right? A lot of non-residents are either looking to come back to India or they are looking to have a place in India in case they need to come back. So we are seeing like a lot of buying from non-resident Indians, particularly in the US and also in the Middle East. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Hi, Mr. Mani.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a faculty here, and I wanted to know, your experience working with developers. Earlier customers were reluctant, and developers lacked that professional approach, and trust was a big factor. Now, you representing also developers, your platform, does the trust of the customer increases, and how is your experience related to payments with the developer? Do you see them getting more professionalized, or do they deal differently with you as compared to customers? If you can share your experiences.
I think, see, I started in real estate in late 2015, and that was before the Real Estate Regulation Act. I think with the Real Estate Regulation Act, RERA as it's called in short, right? I think things have changed tremendously. In most cities, I think RERA has been implemented fairly strongly. The best implementation has been in the state of Gujarat. So developers take RERA very seriously. Right? So gone are the days where people would leverage and launch like 10 projects at the same time and from one project to the other. We're seeing all those days are gone. So you're seeing like a market where customers are also very, because projects which have been approved under RERA, right? Customers are very confident in those projects, right? And actually, if you also read the news, there's not been too many cases in the recent past where developers have defaulted on the entire project. Of course, there's been the Amrapali and the Unitech and all that. That's of the past, right? But more recently, we find developers have become very professional in the way they deal with customers, and they're very serious about complying with RERA.
Really, do they really see you as a partner? You're a more investor-backed company. I mean,
no, we have been we work with on the PropTiger side. We work with only Category A developers, and all of them see us as a partner. In fact, last week I hosted a webinar on housing, and we had the CEO of Prestige, Godrej, Lodha, and Mahindra Life Spaces participate in that.
Great. And also, one thing which you mentioned, that there are strategic investors who had real estate business, like an Australian firm which has invested in you, and then having a financial investors like SoftBank, who are there. So do you see a lot of pressure from the financial investors in terms of getting the value, like sometimes maybe on the cost side, sometimes increasing the revenue, which might not be as per how the market sentiments are in the market? And how do you deal with that? Because I mean, they have their expertise in their own country, whereas India, a little different, market risks are different. So, how do you deal with that?
No, I see that's a great question, but one of the things, fortunate things for us is for Real Estate Australia or for News Corporation, right? Both of them actually missed out on China. Right.
Okay.
And so both of them are viewing India as a long-term opportunity. So that is really helpful to us because they make regular trips to India. We also have them meet with developers and all that. So they do understand the Indian geography pretty well, and they are in it for the long-term game. Right. So it's a long-term play for them. Thank you so much. And
thank you, Mr. Rangarajan. Thank you so much. And we are sorry if we have kind of held you back.
Not a problem.
It was wonderful having you around on for this webinar. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, sir.